Have you ever had like one of those nights where just everything goes wrong
Oh, yeah.
and a plan that you thought was, totally foolproof just blows up in your face
Yeah.
and you're left just scrambling to survive?
hmm
Well, imagine that feeling, but magnified like 1,000 times with thousands of angry warriors chasing you down.
Oh, wow.
That's what happened to Hernan Cortez and his conquistadors
Right.
during the No-Shit Tryst,
Uh-huh.
the Night of Tears.
Yeah. That's a night that could have easily rewritten history, June 30th, 1520.
Yeah.
Picture this scene, a torrential downpour,
Oh, wow.
drenching the magnificent Aztec capital Tenochtitlan.
Okay.
Cortez and his men are attempting a desperate escape, their dreams of gold and glory hanging by a thread,
Right.
trying to navigate the city's intricate network of canals and causeways.
And we've got firsthand accounts from the conquistadors themselves.
We do.
Descriptions of the dazzling treasures that eventually made their way back to Europe, and a glimpse into the devastating impact of a smallpox epidemic that would reshape the balance of power in the region.
Yeah, it's a story of ambition, ingenuity, and ruthlessness. A clash of civilizations that would have really far-reaching consequences.
So let's rewind back to that fateful night in Tenochtitlan.
Okay.
Cortez and his men are trapped, surrounded by a hostile Aztec population. Supplies are dwindling. The mood is grim.
Yeah.
And escape seems impossible. What were they thinking?
Well, desperation can be a powerful motivator,
Yeah.
And Cortez hesitated at first,
Really?
torn between the urge to flee and the desire to salvage all the treasure he had accumulated.
Yeah, of course.
But his captains, Alvarado and Olid, they urged him to act decisively. They knew that a prolonged siege would just mean certain death.
So they hatched this daring plan,
They did.
involving a portable bridge ingeniously constructed from the palace doors.
From the palace doors.
They almost made it out, too.
Almost.
Almost.
Under the cover of darkness, they managed to cross the first 3 canals undetected. Imagine the tension, the hushed whispers, the fear of discovery in every footstep.
Oh, yeah.
But then just when they thought they might pull it off,
Oh.
a woman fetching water spotted them and raised the alarm.
I bet that was a heart-stopping moment.
You can say that again. The eerie silence of the night was shattered by war cries.
Oh, no.
The Aztecs, alerted to the escape attempt, launched just a furious attack.
Oh, wow.
Canoes swarmed the causeway, arrows rained down from all sides.
Oh, my God.
And the makeshift bridge, unable to withstand the onslaught, collapsed into the water.
It must have been absolute chaos, a scene of utter pandemonium.
Imagine the Spaniards weighed down by their heavy armor, struggling to stay afloat amidst the surging current,
Yeah.
desperately trying to fend off attackers from all sides. It was a massacre.
Oh, wow.
Hundreds of Spaniards perished that night, along with countless indigenous allies, horses, cannons, and tragically, most of their treasure.
It's amazing Cortez even survived that night. If he had died there, his name would likely be a footnote in history, a cautionary tale of reckless ambition.
Precisely. But Cortez was a survivor. And despite this devastating setback, his ambition remained undimmed.
Wow.
He regrouped, rallied his remaining forces, and began to strategize his next move. Little did he know that a new and even more formidable enemy was about to enter the scene.
Yeah.
An enemy that wouldn't rely on brute force or weaponry, but on something far more insidious and deadly.
You're talking about smallpox, right?
I am.
Yeah. I can only imagine the devastating impact a disease like that must have had on a population with no prior immunity.
The arrival of smallpox in Mexico, likely carried by one of Narvaez's men, was a game changer.
Wow.
While Cortez was licking his wounds and planning his comeback.
Right?
This invisible enemy was silently sweeping through the land, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake.
So while the Spaniards were regrouping, the Aztecs were facing an entirely different kind of battle.
Yeah.
A battle against an unseen enemy, a foe they couldn't fight with their traditional weapons or tactics.
It was a battle they were destined to lose. Smallpox spread like wildfire, decimating entire villages. It eventually reached Tenochtitlan, weakening the Aztecs significantly.
Oh, no.
Even Cortez's allies in Tlaxcala were not spared, losing about a third of their population to the disease.
It's a sobering reminder of the power of disease to reshape the course of history.
Indeed. It's often the unforeseen, the unpredictable that truly tips the scales.
Right.
In this case, it wasn't just Spanish military might that brought down the Aztec Empire,
Right.
but a microscopic enemy that arrived silently and unleashed its fury with devastating consequences.
And as if the smallpox epidemic wasn't enough of a challenge, The Aztecs were also facing a style of warfare they'd never encountered before.
Yeah.
Cortez wasn't interested in ritualistic battles or capturing prisoners for sacrifice.
No.
He was waging a war of attrition, a brutal and calculated campaign designed to crush his opponents.
You've hit on a crucial point. The Aztecs were accustomed to a very different kind of warfare,
Right.
often focused on displays of prowess and the capture of prisoners for religious sacrifice. They fought with obsidian-edged clubs and spears, relying on shock tactics and individual bravery.
Yeah.
Cortez, on the other hand, brought with him the European style of war.
Yeah.
Cannons, muskets, steel swords,
Right.
and a strategic approach that emphasized siege warfare and psychological manipulation.
It's fascinating to see how these two very different approaches to warfare clashed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cortez understood the importance of instilling fear and breaking the will of his opponents.
Mm-hmm.
He targeted key trade routes, choked off supplies to Tenochtitlan,
Wow.
and made brutal examples of cities that resisted, often destroying them completely.
That must have sent shockwaves through the region.
It did. It was a deliberate strategy of terror
Yeah.
designed to dissuade any potential allies from joining the Aztec cause.
Right.
And sadly, it proved incredibly effective.
Wow.
Many indigenous groups, witnessing the ruthlessness of the Spanish, chose to side with Cortez,
Yeah.
seeing him as the winning horse in this brutal power struggle.
Wow. We let off with Cortez regrouping after that devastating Night of Tears.
Right.
And smallpox just sweeping through the Aztec Empire.
Yeah.
It's a story full of twists and turns, and just when you think it can't get any more dramatic, well, it does.
That's the thing about history. It rarely follows a straight path.
Yeah.
Just when you think you've got it figured out, a new challenge emerges, a new player enters the scene, and the entire game changes.
So true. And in this case, while this clash of civilizations was unfolding in Mexico, something fascinating was happening back in Europe.
Ah, yes. This is where the story takes an interesting turn.
Hmm.
Imagine this. It's 1520 in Brussels,
Okay.
and the treasures that Cortez had sent back from Mexico,
Right.
intricate goldwork, shimmering feathers and weapons unlike anything Europeans had ever seen, are being displayed for all to marvel at.
I can only imagine the awe and astonishment, a glimpse into a world so different, so exotic. It must have been like stepping into a fantastical tale.
Exactly. One person who was particularly struck by this exhibition was Albrecht Dürer, the renowned German artist.
Oh, yeah?
His diary entries offer a vivid glimpse into the European fascination with these artifacts.
Yeah.
He was captivated by the craftsmanship, the artistry, and the sheer otherworldliness of these objects.
So on one hand, you have this brutal war unfolding in Mexico.
Right.
And on the other, you have these treasures being displayed in Europe, sparking curiosity and, let's be honest, a good deal of envy.
It's a powerful juxtaposition, isn't it?
Yeah.
The allure of the unknown, the promise of untold riches fueled further Spanish ambition.
Okay.
Word of the treasures in Mexico spread like wildfire, attracting waves of new conquistadors, each eager to claim their share of glory and gold.
So Cortez, despite his setback during the Night of Tears, was actually gaining more support thanks to the very treasures he'd been forced to abandon.
It's a strange twist of fate, isn't it? Cortez's initial defeat, the loss of his treasure, ended up serving as a powerful advertisement for the riches of Mexico. It's a reminder that history is full of unintended consequences.
And all this leads us to a pivotal moment in Cortez's campaign, his strategic victory at Texcoco, the second largest city in the Aztec Empire.
Texcoco was a game changer for Cortez. By capturing this city, he gained control of a crucial naval base, giving him a strategic advantage on Lake Texcoco, the heart of the Aztec Empire. He also effectively cut off Tenochtitlan's main supply route, tightening his grip on the Aztec capital.
So Cortez is starting to look less like an underdog and more like a force to be reckoned with.
Absolutely. And if capturing Texcoco wasn't enough, remember that shipwright Martin Lopez who survived the Night of Tears?
Yes.
Well, he'd been hard at work in Tlaxcala, building a fleet of brigantines for Cortez.
Wait, so Cortez now has ships on a lake?
That's right.
Yeah.
Imagine the scene: 12 ships, built piece by piece in the highlands of Mexico, transported to the lake and assembled under the watchful eyes of both Spanish and indigenous allies. The arrival of these brigantines in Texcoco marked a turning point in the war.
It must have been an intimidating sight for the Aztecs, seeing these strange European vessels on their lake, a symbol of Cortez's growing power and technological superiority.
Absolutely. It was a psychological blow as much as a military one. Cortez now had the means to control the lake, to blockade Tenochtitlan, and to launch attacks from a position of strength. The Aztecs, on the other hand, were facing a new and unfamiliar threat, one that challenged their traditional ways of warfare and their very understanding of the world.
So Cortez has the upper hand, new Spanish reinforcements, indigenous allies who have seen his ruthlessness and chosen to side with him, and now a fleet of ships. What does he do next?
Well, he doesn't launch an all-out attack right away. Cortez was a master strategist. He knew that a direct assault on Tenochtitlan, a city built for defense, would be costly. Instead, he opts for a more methodical approach, a siege that would slowly strangle the city and break the Aztec spirit.
Okay, so walk me through this siege. What did Cortez do to isolate and weaken Tenochtitlan?
Cortez was a master of siege warfare, utilizing tactics that had been honed over centuries of European conflict. He divided his forces strategically. Some patrolled the lake, with the brigantines intercepting any canoes attempting to bring supplies into the city. Others were positioned on the causeways, cutting off access by land.
So he basically created a noose around Tenochtitlan, cutting off its lifelines to the outside world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, Tenochtitlan wasn't your typical city. It was built on an island in the middle of a lake, connected to the mainland by those causeways we've been talking about. This made it incredibly difficult to attack directly, but also vulnerable to a well-executed blockade.
So Cortez had the Aztecs right where he wanted them, trapped, isolated, and running out of resources. But I imagine the Aztecs didn't just sit back and accept their fate.
You're absolutely right. The Aztecs, led by their new emperor Cuauhtémoc, a fierce and determined leader, fought back with everything they had. They launched daring raids, attempting to break through the Spanish lines. They attacked the brigantines on the lake, knowing that control of the water was crucial to their survival.
I can only imagine the intensity of those battles.
The sources describe scenes of incredible bravery and desperation on both sides. Can you picture it? Canoes swarming the Spanish ships, warriors leaping onto the decks, the clash of steel against obsidian, the screams of the wounded echoing across the water.
It sounds terrifying and exhilarating all at the same time.
It was a clash of worlds, of cultures, of fighting styles. The Aztecs were skilled warriors fighting on familiar territory, defending their homes and their way of life. But the Spanish had their own advantages: armor, gunpowder, and a relentless determination to achieve their goals.
Yeah. And let's not forget the most insidious weapon of all, starvation.
Oh.
As weeks turned into months, the impact of the blockade would have been devastating.
You're right. Cortez's siege wasn't just about military confrontations. It was about slowly draining the life out of Tenochtitlan. Food and water supplies dwindled. People were reduced to eating insects, roots, even the bark of trees. The city, once a symbol of Aztec power and prosperity, was transformed into a scene of suffering and despair.
It's heartbreaking to imagine what the people inside the city must have endured: the constant fear of attack, the dwindling rations, the knowledge that their world was crumbling around them.
The sources paint a grim picture of conditions inside Tenochtitlan during those final months of the siege. Bodies piled up in the streets, the stench of death filled the air. Disease, likely exacerbated by malnutrition, spread through the weakened population. Even the most valiant Aztec warriors were no match for the relentless grip of hunger and despair.
We left off with Tenochtitlan under siege, the Aztecs facing starvation and disease, and a relentless enemy determined to crush their resistance. It's a story that's both tragic and captivating.
It's a reminder that even the most powerful empires are vulnerable, that the course of history can be shaped by a complex interplay of factors: ambition, ingenuity, disease, and the clash of cultures.
So how did this epic struggle finally come to an end? What was the final blow that broke the Aztec resistance? I'm on the edge of my seat.
The final chapter of the Siege of Tenochtitlan is a story of both desperation and defiance. By August 13th, 1521, after months of grueling siege warfare, Cortez launched a coordinated assault, pushing his forces deeper into the heart of the city.
I can only imagine the intensity of that final push. The Spanish soldiers, hardened by months of fighting their indigenous allies, seeking to settle old scores or simply to survive in this new world order. And the Aztecs defending their homes, their temples, their very way of life.
The fighting was brutal and chaotic, house to house, canal by canal. The Aztecs, though weakened by hunger and disease, fought with incredible tenacity. They knew they were fighting for their very existence.
But Cortez had them surrounded. He controlled the lake with his brigantines, he'd cut off their supplies, and now he was closing in for the kill.
It was a desperate situation for the Aztecs. Their once impregnable city, their source of pride and power, had become a death trap. Yet even in the face of certain defeat, they refused to surrender.
What was the final moment that marked the fall of Tenochtitlan? Was there a decisive battle, a symbolic surrender?
The end came not with a bang, but with the capture of a single man. On that fateful day in August, as Spanish forces pushed deeper into the city, they captured Cuauhtémoc, the Aztec emperor, as he attempted to flee across the lake in a canoe.
Wow, the capture of the emperor, what a dramatic turning point. That must have been a crushing blow to the Aztecs, both symbolically and strategically.
It was. With their leader captured, the remaining Aztec resistance crumbled. The once mighty empire which had ruled over vast swaths of Mesoamerica had fallen. Tenochtitlan, the jewel of the Aztec world, lay in ruins.
It's a story that evokes so many emotions. Awe at the Aztecs' bravery, sadness at their tragic fate, and let's be honest, a bit of unease at the ruthlessness of the conquistadors.
It's a complex story that challenges us to think about the nature of power, the clash of cultures, the impact of disease, and the often unpredictable course of history. The fall of the Aztec Empire is a pivotal moment that continues to resonate centuries later.
It certainly does. And as we wrap up this deep dive into the fall of the Aztecs, I'm left with a sense of wonder and a desire to learn more. What happened to Cuauhtémoc after his capture? What was the fate of the Aztec people under Spanish rule?
Those are questions for another deep dive. But as we reflect on this story, I'm struck by the resilience of the human spirit, both in victory and defeat. The Aztecs, despite facing overwhelming odds, fought with courage and determination. Their story reminds us that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges, there is always hope, always a reason to fight for what we believe in.
Well said. And thank you for joining me on this fascinating journey back in time. It's been an eye-opening experience.
The pleasure was all mine. And for our listeners, if you're intrigued by the story and want to delve deeper into the world of the Aztecs, their culture, their rise, and their eventual fall, I encourage you to explore the sources we've mentioned today. You might be surprised by what you discover.